It's the Criterion. It's the Criterion. Criterion. N. Project.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Criterion Project podcast, the podcast where we talk about the movies that are available to stream on the Criterion channel. I am Conrado Falco and I'm here with the wonderful Rachel Wagner.
Hi!
Hello, Rachel. Today we are talking about Nosferatu the Vampyre, directed by the great Werner Herzog. Rachel, have you seen about 2,000 White Rats? Because I have them in my apartment and I think I have lost them and they're
My
roaming around the
gosh.
city somewhere.
Like, it was very ironic that we were reviewing this movie because I had just this week had a mouse in my house, in my room, actually, in my bedroom. And I hate mice. Like, I like them in movies. I like Mickey Mouse. I do not like regular mouse. And it was so gross. And I had to have the organ guy come and we put traps and then I ended up catching it. And it was a it was a tense moment, a tense couple of days. Let's just say that.
All right.
Yeah.
Seems like a fitting start to the spooky month of October.
Yeah, it really
which
was.
which is kind of why we're doing a horror-themed movie this week. And also, we should probably announce that Criterion Project is going to be releasing 2 episodes a month starting in October. Is that right, Rachel?
Yeah, we're gonna do our best to do that. December is gonna be really hard, but I'm gonna try my best to do that.
Yeah, we're gonna make it work somehow. We'll figure it out later. But right now, before we go into Nosferatu and all the spooky vampire stuff, why don't we talk a little bit about what we've been watching on the Criterion channel other than Nosferatu?
Yes. So what has really been exciting me, and I think next time I'll have a couple more of these to talk about, is they are having a British Hitchcock series, month, whatever you want to call it. And they have a ton of his early films on there, and it's perfect for Halloween. And so I watched The 39 Steps. And from 1935, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a super fun little thriller. It's a man in kind of inadvertently gets caught up in this spy conspiracy web, I guess you would say. And it was really fun. It had a lot of chases and there's the bad guys were after him, and there's I thought he had pretty good chemistry with the leading lady. I thought the guy was Robert Donat was very charismatic, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a fun little movie.
All right, British Hitchcock. Sounds great. I have not seen The 39 Steps, but I have seen a play called The 39 Steps, which is a version of the movie, I think, that is meant to be a parody of Hitchcock movies. And it's very, very funny. If you ever hear about, to anyone who's listening and to you, Rachel, of a production of The 39 Steps going to your city or town, I would recommend seeing it because it's a hilarious
it's a one-man
play.
show, right?
It's not. It's a play. The one I saw is a play. There's 4 actors, sorry, and and some of them cycle. There's one guy who plays who I assume is the lead role of the movie, and then one actress and 2 other actors who play every other character. So I think that's kind of the.
I have seen that. It's been a couple of years, but yeah, that is a lot of fun for sure.
Yeah, I saw it a while ago too. It's a very funny play, I thought. And I'm curious to see the movie because it's probably a non-comedic version of that, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it does have some funny parts, but mostly it's a thriller. It's very similar to North by Northwest,
Oh, okay.
where the innocent man just kind of stumbles into the uh,
Right.
yeah. So that's how I would compare it to, and yeah, it's not scary. It's just uh,
Mhm.
a innocent man on the run kind of thriller.
Great.
So
That sounds
yeah,
great.
I remember in that play, there's a scene where he does this whole monologue where he's putting on different hats, and each hat
Hmm.
is a different character.
Yeah, yeah, that's
So
right.
he has this like conference. That's why I was thinking it was a one man play, but yeah, he's having
Yeah,
conversations with himself.
yeah, right. Because
Yeah.
they're playing all the same character.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, it's a very funny play.
Yeah. Cool.
Um, yeah, that sounds great. I also have a recommendation on the channel. They have I guess one of their what you said series, or I guess collections that they've put up, is called directed by Christian Petzold, who, since we're talking about a German director today, Christian Petzold is one of I think my favorite German directors working right now. And
Hmm.
I haven't seen all of his movies yet, but one that I've seen that's now available on Criterion channel, and that I think it's great. It's probably one of the best movies I saw. It's like best of the decade material when, the year ends and we're all making those sorts of lists. This one's going to be a real contender for me, and it's called Phoenix. Um,
Oh, that sounds familiar. I feel like I've
yeah,
heard that.
I think it got really good reviews, and a bunch of people talked about it when it came out of a couple years ago now. I think 2015 or 14. Um, and it's basically this story that takes place after World War II, and this Jewish woman played by Nina Haas, who is incredible in the movie. She's been in a concentration camp and was disfigured, so she had to have reconstructive surgery. Excuse me. And when she comes out of the camp and goes back to her life after the war, she goes looking for her husband, and because of the surgery, he does not recognize her, and he thinks that she is a stranger who just kind of looks like his wife but not really. And she decides to just go with it since he didn't recognize her, and he tries to get her into some sort of scheme. It's a really, really cool movie. It's has a lot of film noir elements to it, a little bit of Hitchcock too. And I don't want to spoil too much of where it goes because it's a really
Mm.
exciting movie, and it has one of the best endings of a movie that I have ever seen. It is,
Hmm.
yeah, it is. It really like knocked my socks off when I first saw it. So I really recommend it to you and to anyone else who hasn't seen it. It's an incredible movie.
Cool. Yeah, that sounds really good. I'll have to check that out.
All right. Yeah. So why don't we get into Nosferatu? Would you like to introduce us to what this movie is, Rachel?
Sure. Yeah. So this film is based on the classic vampire story of Dracula, by Bram Stoker, and also the 1922 silent film. And it's about a man named Jonathan Harker, who is basically kind of tricked into going to Transylvania to offer to try to sell this property to Count Dracula, the mysterious Count Dracula, and he's married to this woman named Lucy, who is kind of the perfect woman, perfect wife, perfect, and and it's basically about his experience with this vampire Nosferatu, and and I don't know what happens as this evil kind of gets unleashed into the world. And like you said, there's lots of rats and lots of death, and
Yeah.
it's that class. It's a classic story.
Yeah. It is, I guess, a bit of a it's a little strange describing what the movie is in its
Yeah.
origins, just because it's a remake of the 1922 silent movie called Nosferatu by F.W. Murnau, which in turn was an adaptation of Dracula, only it was an unofficial adaptation. So they had to change all the names, and they had to change the name of Dracula to, in that movie, it's called Count Orlok, and they gave the title Nosferatu, which means like, I guess it means undead or something like that.
Mhm.
And then I think they were actually sued by
Yeah.
the Bram Stoker estate, right, for infringing on their copyright, because they were
Yeah.
like, "This is clearly Dracula. You just changed all the names."
Yeah.
So that was
Yeah,
a
and I think a bunch of the copies were destroyed.
Mhm.
Uh, that's part of the settlement or whatever, and so, but there still remained, I guess, still
Yeah,
remained some of the copies. So, but
yeah, so that they could
yeah,
save it. So yeah, so Werner Herzog wants to make um, a remake of the movie that by one of his heroes, Murnau. But then, of course, by the 1970s, the copyright of Dracula was already in the public domain, so he was able to use the actual original names
yeah,
in the movie.
and I really like the novel of Dracula. I think it's so it's this is this is a little bit where maybe my podcasting abilities will fail me a little bit, because I find it difficult to explain why I like it. I just do.
Hmm.
I don't know. I think that it's got such great atmosphere, and I really like the characters, and I just think it's creepy in the most like fun kind of way. Something's creepy, and uh,
You're talking about the book, right?
the book, and I just like the story of Dracula. It's a really fun, interesting, creepy, atmospheric story. And so whether it's the silent movie or whether it's this, I just think it's a good story.
Hmm. I have actually never read the book. I actually have kind of a funny story about it, I guess, which is my only encounter with the actual Dracula novel was one time. Um, my I guess I have to preface by saying I went to a German school for high school, so I learned
Mm,
German there. So I had German class, which was basically like the equivalent to like an English class in America, I guess.
mhm.
And my German teacher one day, I think she just like forgot that we had class, so she didn't like plan anything. So she just came with a copy of Dracula, and she says, "Today I'm gonna read a bit of Dracula to you." She just started reading for the whole period, and then at the end she was like, "Okay, that was nice, wasn't it? Like just like to have someone read to you for once." And then that was it. So I thought that was
That's
kind of funny.
funny.
We always
Yeah,
suspected she didn't plan this, she just didn't know what to do, and so she just grabbed the book off the shelf and read to us.
that is
um,
funny.
yeah, but that is my only encounter with the novel, so I don't really know how faithful this adaptation is to the novel. Do you know, are you more familiar with that sort of thing?
Yeah, it's very faithful. There's a couple characters that are in the novel that aren't in this, but for the most part, it's pretty faithful. And it, the only, I guess, the only major difference I would say is that in the in the novel, the Lucy is basically kind of, she's basically treated as almost like a Madonna-esque, like in the sense of like the sense of the old sense of the word, kind of character. Like she is like worshipped basically by everybody in
Hmm.
the as this sort of perfect woman, and they do some of that here, but she's really put on a pedestal by everybody, and as as somebody to be basically almost worshipped,
Hmm.
the perfect woman, the ideal woman, and so that's toned down a little bit, I think, in this, but
Yeah.
but
I
yeah,
mean,
it's pretty close.
yeah, it's interesting because in this movie, Lucy ends up being kind of the character who, the only one who believes and knows that it's Dracula, that it's causing all this mayhem and this chaos in the city, right?
Hmm.
And everyone else kind of does the doctors and the scientists are like, well, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't really believe her until the end, when she is the one who takes matters in her own hands, really, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's interesting compared with this sort of like passive, what you're talking about, like virgin, like
Yeah.
sort of worship of her and presentation in the novel. Yeah. So why don't we talk a little bit of what we thought of the movie as a whole? What did you think?
I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really fun and creepy, and uh, I liked the cinematography. I liked the atmosphere that they get, and uh, I thought it was really good.
All right. All right. I have to say, I maybe am a little different from you in some fundamental levels, just because I enjoyed the movie quite a bit in certain parts. I don't think it's my favorite Herzog movie, or one of the better ones from him, in
Mm-hmm.
my opinion. Um, and I think it has to do because I don't think I really respond to the Dracula story, which I think it's funny, since you were just saying the opposite, right?
Mm-hmm.
That you do respond to that story, and almost regardless of the package. So I think that's maybe something interesting to talk about. I'll try to figure out what it is about the story that
Mm-hmm.
fascinates you and kind of uh, leaves me a little cold. I don't know.
I just like. I think it's fun to be fun to watch sort of a creepy, atmospheric uh, vampire story. I just think
Hmm.
it's kind of fun.
Yeah. What did you think, talking about creepy, what did you think of Klaus Kinski, who plays Nosferatu, and the performance
Yeah.
of Prince Dracula? I think he's like famously a sort of crazy, intense kind of actor, and he is definitely not like he's not going for subtlety, I guess, when he plays this vampire.
Mm-hmm.
To begin with, he has this like crazy makeup and these fangs, and he's pale white and totally bald, and he moves like he's, I don't know. Um,
Yeah, it's
I,
very. I mean, it's very iconic. The and similar to the 1922 look. And I thought that he was very, very good. I thought.
yeah, I think. I think it's that sometimes it's over the top. That I think one of the things about this movie and about Werner Herzog in the 70s that I find very interesting is that he has this sort of way of presenting things, in which I think sometimes things are funny, and I don't know if they're supposed to be funny, but I kind of feel like it's not that they're like um I know that I'm making fun of the movie, right? But it's more so that things are just like so extreme sometimes, that I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe what I'm seeing. Like,
Hmm.
all the rats, and the way that the Dracula moves and comes to him when he's gonna, like, try to, when he sees like the droplet of blood in Jonathan's hand, and he comes up to him and he's like, oh, let me clean that for you, the oldest remedy in the book or whatever. And he starts like sucking his blood and whatever. um I don't know. There's some. I thought, for me, the most exciting thing about the movie was sort of like this totally going for it performance, and totally weird, and like, you know weirdo, creepy vampire
Hmm.
performance in the middle of it.
Well, yeah, and I guess I like sort of old school monster movie, like the old school Universal monster movies, like
Hmm.
Frankenstein and the Invisible Man and stuff like that. I think it's just fun, those scary tropes that gets all creepy, and because now they do something like that, and it's always uh just full of, I don't know, full of profanity and full of uh it's too, like, it's not violence done in a, like, a campy way. It's not violence done in a fun way, to me. A lot of
Hmm.
times it's too it gets kind of mean spirited to me, and it's not just like I hate using the word fun, but I'm struggling to find another word to describe what I'm saying, what I'm feeling. But I don't know. I just feel like these kind of genre pictures are hard to find that I walk away being like, oh, that was a good time. I just really enjoyed that. I liked the creepiness. I liked the, and they get too sort of maybe too realistic. I actually like the fact that it's kind of just trying to tell a kind of a classic genre film. If that does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah, I think so. Um, would you say this was a fun watch for you? Because I thought it was kind of slow, and I was wondering about that, what people might think about that. What do you have to say?
Yeah,
Or-
I really enjoyed it, and yeah, I didn't find it too slow for me, but it's definitely, there's not like a ton of plot, so I can see that. Like Reinfeld.
Uh, it was a little strange, Reinfeld. I didn't know if that was actually his laugh or it was like it. Sometimes it seemed like it was like a ADR laugh sort of thing that they had put in post production. I don't know why. It was just so eerie and
Yeah.
different, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Did you have like a strong opinion about him?
I thought that he was all part of sort of that creepy, the atmosphere, part of it's sort of uncomfortable. It's sort of, the crazy laugh, like it's also kind of a thing. And so, yeah, I enjoyed it. The only thing I struggled with was just the rats. Or so I do wish that Criterion Channel had a better fast forward. Because if you try to skip ahead, at least for me, when I'm watching it, it kind of crashes. It doesn't let you do that. And so I'm like, I gotta watch all these rats. Ew, it's so gross. Ew,
Right.
I hate rats. Ugh. So
Oh man.
that was the only hard part for me. But I mean, it's not that uncomfortable feeling is good. That's what you want in a scary, creepy movie, is you want to feel kind of uncomfortable and kind of grossed out. Like that's part of the experience. So I guess I shouldn't want to fast forward, but I did. I'm like, go away. The rats are so gross.
Since we're talking about Dracula, which I feel like it's a very well-known story, is it okay to like go into a little bit of spoilers? I have a couple questions about the ending for you, and just because like I said, I have not read the Dracula book. I have seen the Francis Ford Coppola movie, which I don't know how faithful that is, and I have also seen a stage production of Dracula, and now I've seen this also. And I was wondering, because from what I remember from that stage show and also from the other movie, is that at the end, the movie, they kind of ends with people sort of like kind of banding together and defeating Dracula, right? Like Jonathan and Dr. Van Helsing and whatever. And this movie kind of ends in a bit of a different way, right? Is that closer or further away from the novel in your memory?
The book ends. See, in the book, there is a couple characters that aren't in this movie. There's a woman named Mina, and then a man named Quincy. Basically, they were able to use this. They're able to make Dracula crumble to dust, and then Mina is kind of freed from being a vampire, and then and then this character Quincy dies, and there's a Jonathan Harker leaves. There's a note from him that 7 years after the events of the novel, detailing his life with Mina, and so basically, like he ends up marrying Mina.
Yeah. which I'm pretty sure because I remember reading this somewhere that Mina, the Mina character in the novel is basically the Lucy character in the Herzog movie. He just exchanged the names.
Well,
Lucy is
Lucy is also in the novel, and
right. So in the novel, there's two women, and he kind of like merged them together,
yeah,
like in decided to give her the name Lucy instead of Mina. But Mina is kind of like the woman that Jonathan is in love with in the novel, right? And they end up together.
yes, Mina is Jonathan's fiance,
Right.
and in
Which in
there,
the movie is Lucy.
right? Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And
Right.
so Lucy is, because the book is done by epistle, it's done by letters,
Mm-hmm.
and the and Lucy is like friends with Mina, and so they, and like I said, there's this uh there's Lucy is engaged to this guy named Arthur,
Mm-hmm.
uh and so anyway, so there's more characters in the book, but basically they end up, Mina kind of ends up defeating Mina and Quincy and Van Helsing. All these characters end up basically defeating Dracula, and
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. And the movie, it almost kind of like takes this sort of, I guess it's a pretty happy or successful ending for the characters in the novel. And I feel like this movie gives it a much darker
Yeah.
ending, right? Because it is like basically Lucy sacrifices herself in order to defeat uh, Dracula, and once she's done that, um, Jonathan basically continues on as a vampire and not as a human, right? That's what I
Well, he
understood the ending
basically
to be.
becomes Dracula. You see him he gets the teeth, he gets the, and then he
Hmm.
accuses Van Helsing of murdering Dracula and
Yeah,
sends the cops after him, and tries to get him in prison, and
yeah.
yeah.
And he goes on. I'm not entirely sure why he is able to go out in the sun at the end when Dracula wasn't. Maybe because he's a newer vampire. I'm not really sure what was going on there. But he
That's true.
definitely, the implication is that that he has taken over the mantle, right? And despite all of the sacrifice, sort of the darkness of the vampire lives on. Um,
Hmm.
is how I read it, which I think, I guess it does go pretty, uh, seems of a piece with kind of the Werner Herzog type of worldview, I guess, which is pretty dark in a lot of ways. Um,
Hmm.
I guess this is a good way to talk a little bit about him and our whether or not we're familiar with his work. As far as I know, he is part of a group of filmmakers that are described as the new German cinema. Basically, around the 70s, a group of directors, which included Werner Herzog, but also Fassbinder and Wim Wenders, who is still working today, also,
Hmm.
who were kind of trying to do a new kind of movie that was not so. I guess a lot of them felt like Germany as a whole was a little bit in denial about the darkness that had happened during World War II and all that it implied about the nature of humanity. And German cinema was kind of trying to be uh, peppy and look at different other stuff. And these people were really kind of saying, no, we should we have to unpack this sort of like darkness and this
Mm.
sort of stuff that has happened in our country and that we don't want to look at, but we have to. So I think Werner Herzog in particular is really interested in looking at making movies about people going insane and people like giving now over to like nature and the idea that humans and kindness is in defiance to like the wild order of nature, right? um and I think this movie kind of fits into that. I don't
Mhm.
know how familiar you are with Werner
Y-
Herzog. Do you have any
Yeah, I'm
thoughts?
more familiar with his documentaries
Mm,
than, I don't think I've actually seen any other of his fiction on all fictional films. But I, really, Grizzly Man is really good. Lo and
Right.
Behold. I like Encounters at the End of the World. I like Cave of Forgotten Dreams. Those documentaries, because he's got such a great voice.
Well,
Gotta
yeah.
love.
So yeah, definitely one of the famous documentary narrators of all time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. So I actually don't know if I've seen any other of his narrative films.
yeah, I guess Nosferatu is 1979, so that's pretty early in his career, I would say. Definitely in the 70s he was really into, from what I've seen, which is also not that much, I have to admit, but he was really into this sort of like creepiness and darkness, and looking at these crazy humans going wild. And the actor Klaus Kinski, who plays Dracula, he was a collaborator of him in a lot of movies, and he usually plays these sort of like really like deranged men who go crazy, or like are villains or things like that.
Mm-hmm.
um and I guess in the documentaries is really more like in the 2000s and later, what you have talked about. And I
Mm-hmm.
guess by then he was into some other stuff, although I do think that in Grizzly Man, for example, you do see this sort of like these thoughts about like the difference between the wild world that cannot be dominated, and humans' desire to like think that nature is like humanity, like in the way the guy kind of like wants to think of the bears as his friends and people that are just like him, and but it ends up ending in tragedy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. And I can't really think of that many documentarians that also have the fictional uh stories, and also he does some acting too, doesn't he?
Right, he's
Yeah.
been in a couple movies. He's been in Jack Reacher with Tom Cruise
Mm-hmm.
lately, and he's also going to be in The Mandalorian for Disney Plus.
Oh, yes, that's
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah, he's in the trailer.
Yeah,
um so yeah.
I forgot that. Yeah, so it's really interesting. I can't think of any other person that has
Yeah,
that kind of career.
I would say the first thing I think of a director who does fiction and also documentary would be Spike Lee, who's done
Oh.
he does a lot of fiction mostly, but he's done a couple of very well-known documentaries as well, especially for television. He
Mm,
did that Hurricane Katrina documentary, which was a big deal when it came out.
that's interesting. Yeah, I guess that's true. So that's definitely where I'm most comfortable, and fair. I think the last thing I saw of his was the uh, the Lo and Behold. I think it's
Right,
Lo
lo
and
and
Behold.
behold.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, that is really entertaining, interesting. Yeah, Lo and Behold, Reveries of the Connected World, and it's basically all about the internet. And that was 2016. And it's a interesting, fun little documentary. So
Cool.
that'd be the last one I
So
saw. But I just think if you're looking for something that's got good atmosphere, that's a creepy, kind of classic, it feels like one of the Universal monster movies. If you're looking for
mhm.
something like that, then I think this would be a fun choice.
Yeah, we should also say there's a whole section in Criterion channel right now called Directed by Werner Herzog. So there's a lot of his movies that are up there, a lot of which I haven't seen yet. So, but if start with Nosferatu, and for you, Rachel, if you like Nosferatu, maybe you want to give something else a try.
Mm.
Um, I think let me see what's up there. Fitzcarraldo is, I think, might be a fun movie that you would like. It's about this guy who's trying to get this boat to build an opera house in the Amazon.
Mm.
It's a pretty cool movie. But anyway, how about we do a little bit talk about our usual questions? The first one
Mm-hmm.
being, what do you think makes this a criterion? film?
Yeah, I mean, I just think it is beautifully made, and it's a really solid example of the genre that it's trying to be in. So if I was Criterion, I'd want my collection or my channel to have some good example of every single genre. And I think if you were looking for a good example of this, then this would be a good choice. So that's kind of how I think of it. So yeah, I can see why it's a Criterion.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really interesting point. I was gonna say just I feel like I always not always, but a lot of the times I just go back to like who the director is, just because I feel like Criterion a lot of the time has this sort of very tour theory sort of way of looking at things. I think once they decide, or when a
Yeah.
director is important, when a director is someone that you know is important to history or to art, they all their movies are become interesting for Criterion to look at. So there is that. But I like what you're saying about like the genre aspect of it. Makes me think of last episode when we were talking about Top Hat and how there aren't that many musicals in the Criterion collection. And I guess there aren't that many horror movies either that I can think of. I mean,
Yeah.
I guess this also goes into our next question, which is where do you think this fits into the pretentious scale? So is this, like how pretentious is this movie? I think for a horror movie, quite a bit. I don't know if you agree with that.
No, I actually didn't think so. I think this is very approachable. I think you could show this to. I was actually going to give it a 3. I didn't think it was very pretentious at all.
So a three, from what is
Out
the
of
scale?
10.
One
Out
out
of
of 10. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think almost
So you really
anybody.
think it's not at all?
No, I think almost anybody could watch this movie uh, and enjoy it. If you,
Hmm.
yeah, I didn't think it
Yeah.
was very pretentious.
Yeah, I would agree that it's not super pretentious, but I would probably go a little higher than a 3. If we're talking about a 10 out of 10
Uh
scale,
huh.
I think maybe I'll go up to like a 6 or so. I think it's pretty approachable. I think it's like you say, it can be easily watched and enjoyed by a lot of people. You don't have to have like an extensive knowledge of cinema or whatever in order to appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that he is trying to do some artsy stuff with it, though. It's not just a straightforward, you know, down the middle horror movie that is just about like the thrills. I think that he is trying to do some thematic stuff, like the beginning with all the mummies, and then there's a lot of slow motion of the bats flying in the air and the
Mm-hmm.
atmospheric music. I think it all kind of gives it a little bit of a that little extra thing that makes it feel like a little serious, like a
Well,
little
where I saw that most actually though is with sort of the attempt to make Lucy an object of sensuality in the film. I think that's uh maybe where it gets a little bit uh I don't know, gets a little pretentious, but uh the some of those scenes maybe more, but yeah, I and maybe just too many scenes with rats.
right. Well, yeah, you can only be so pretentious with a rat, I guess.
Yeah.
uh, no,
So
that's an interesting
yeah,
question.
I
Now
I thought it was pretty classic.
yeah, no, yeah, 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 for sure, for sure. Now I just want to think of what are the most pretentious rats in cinema. That's an interesting.
Probably it's Ratatouille the most.
Random. Well, Ratatouille is a pretty pretend. Remy is a pretentious rat. Let's say.
Yeah.
Let's just. We have to say it.
Maybe Ratigan.
Yeah, Radigan's pretty pretentious, but Remy with all that fancy food. Come on, give me a break.
Yeah, it's got to be him. I mean, I normally avoid any movies with rats because it's disgusting. But I can think of and the only other one I can think of is is, well, The Secret of Nim is full of rats.
Yeah.
The Rats of Nim.
Okay. I think we have a spin-off podcast in the making here.
Rats.
Rat Talk or something like that.
Also, in I think it's Last Crusade, there's all the rats.
Mm-hmm.
And I would much prefer snakes, unlike Indy, than rats. Snakes
Right.
way better than rats.
Yeah, I think my wife will agree with you. Anyway,
Yeah.
okay, is that all? Do we have any final thoughts about Nosferatu?
No, it was a lot of fun. I really had a good time watching it. To me,
I'm glad to hear that, since this was, after all, my pick. But next episode will be your pick. So why don't you tell us a little bit of what you're thinking?
we are going to be talking about the 1945 film Blythe Spirits. This is based on the play, which I actually was one of the first plays that I ever saw with my dad. We went to the Utah Shakespeare Festival when I was young, and we saw Blythe Spirit, and this version is directed by David Lean, who is such an interesting director. He has such an eclectic filmography with things like Lawrence of Arabia and Bridge of the River Kwai, Brief Encounter, Dr. Zhivago. So, and then here, this Blythe Spirit. So he's a really interesting director. And this movie, I talked about it a couple episodes ago because I saw it and I thought it was really funny. And it's stars Rex Harrison, and he basically is this writer, and he ends up he has like a seance at his house to try to connect with what he's writing about, and he ends up conjuring, I guess, the spirit of his dead wife, who ends up kind of haunting the house and doesn't get along with his new wife, or is very critical. So he's sort of fighting the spirit of the spirit wife and the real wife. And I thought it was very funny. And so I'll be curious to see what you think.
Great. So the Halloween spirit continues, even though in a comedy form, but still with ghosts and spirits. So yeah, so I'm really looking forward to it. I have never seen it, but I'm really excited about it because it sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think you'll enjoy it. So there we go. That's what we'll talk about next time. That later in this month. So it'll be our first 2 episodes in the month. So very cool.
Yeah, very exciting. All right, it's time to say goodbye. So let's let people know where they can find us on the internet.
Yes. So we have our new Criterion podcast iTunes feed, which we're so excited about.
Yes.
And so make sure you go on there and follow us and leave us your ratings and reviews on iTunes, because we just got approved this last month, so we're really looking forward to really building up the podcast. We kind of was sort of our test run on Rachel's reviews, and now it's its own thing. So it's exciting. We also have our Twitter account, which is Criterion Pod. So make sure you're following us on there, and we'll try to keep it kind of updated on our thoughts about maybe what else we're watching, or some trivia about the upcoming film, that kind of thing. We're excited to have that grow.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can find me. So please follow us at Criterion Project, but also you can find me if you want to follow me personally on Twitter at Coco Hits New York.
That's right. And you can follow me at Rachel underscore reviews on Twitter, and Rachel's underscore reviews on Rachel's underscore reviews on Instagram. So you can check that out.
Great. Before we go, I just found a really funny tidbit about Werner Herzog. So as a goodbye, let me
Uh-huh.
tell you about this time
Yes.
where there was a magazine article or something like that where famous people were asked who their favorite Muppet is. So Ryan Reynolds said his favorite is Gonzo, and then Tom Cruise says his favorite is Kermit. And then they asked Werner Herzog, and he responded, I do not know Jim Henson, and I do not know the Muppets.
Yeah.
Which,
Yeah,
you know,
that's
he's a
funny.
character.
He
Anyway,
is.
see you guys next time. Thanks for
Okay.
listening.
All right. Bye.
Bye.